to cross the wilderness. So, when we see technological innovation, we understand this is what the first chapter of Bereshit means when it says, Na'aseh Adam kidmutenu, b'tzalmenu kidmutenu, God made us not only creations, but creative. And he said to the first humans, Milu et haaretz v'kivshuha, fill the earth and learn how to control it. So every time we are able, for instance, to conquer disease by medicine or distance by communication and travel, every technological advance is a fulfillment of Bereshit 1, of our greatness as being in God's image. So the technology is great. But don't forget, technology gives us power, but it doesn't tell us how to use that power. For that, we need the Torah, because the Torah is our satellite navigation system. It gives us directions in a world that is constantly changing. So we embrace this new technology, but we don't necessarily embrace all the uses people put it to. I'm sure you know, there's just come out a survey from the University of San Diego in America, which shows that the more time you spend on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, WhatsApp, the more miserable you get. Did you know this? So Torah tells us face-to-face communication is what life is about. Don't use this technology to get you to lose your way or lose your faith. So the more complicated the world gets, the more we need this satellite navigation system called the Torah. So much so that I don't know how it is here in Mexico, but I know in Britain, people come to people like me, non-Jews, and say, I'm just going to do a series for the BBC on this. What is the ethics of artificial intelligence? What is the right way and the wrong way to use social media? Because they want the guidance of Torah on this, even the non-Jews. And the beautiful thing is, Moshe Rabbeinu already saw this. He said, Hi chochmatchem uvinatchem la'enei ha'amim. All the nations will realize that you have wisdom. So we need the technology to tell us how, but we need the Torah to tell us why. Okay? Hope that answers the question.
De la Monte. As the next leaders of Orthodox communities, what should our vision be towards homosexual people, which are increasing in numbers in our community?
Oh? It's a great question, but it's not on my list. So please ask it again.
Do we understand that the purpose of Judaism is to improve us as people? Because we see people who care for the Torah and do not improve as people. What is missing?
If we understand that the purpose of Judaism is to improve us as a people, why we see people that care for Torah and they do not improve? What is missing?
Creation of Torah. Because, as the rabbis said, Lo nitna Torah, ela lo nitnu mitzvot, ela letzaref bahem et habriot. God gave us mitzvahs to make us more sensitive. So, when you see people setting a bad example, the best thing you can do is set a good example. Okay?
Hello, from Colegio Brotarbut. Considering the many barriers that have been created by Jews inside their own Jewish communities, what solution would be more viable than a Habat Hinam proposed by our sages in order to break those barriers created by us?
One more time, because I have the first edition, you have the second edition. Yeah.
Okay, so
one more time.
Considering all the barriers that we as Jews have created inside our own Jewish communities around the world, what solution would be more viable than a Habat Hinam proposed by our sages in order to break those barriers in today's society, considering that a Habat Hinam is really difficult to achieve?
The three simple ways of doing it are: number one, music. Sing together. Number two, food. Eat together. Number three, study together. Number four, argue together. Number five, remember that we are all one family, even if we're very, very different. We are a tiny people. For every Jew in the world, there are more than 100 Muslims and 183 Christians. But the human brain is a very tiny thing, and it's very clever. Do you know why? Because all the little bits of the human brain are connected. The neural pathways, the interconnectedness of all our nerve cells in the brain make it incredible. That is what makes the Jewish people extraordinary. We're very small, but we're very connected. But if we allow ourselves to be split apart, it's like, God forbid, suffering brain damage. Are you with me? Because the connections get broken, and then we lose our abilities. So we're not going to agree on everything. The wonderful thing about the Jewish people is, for a tiny people, we have more diversity per head than any other nation on earth. Just stand at the Kotel, and you will see every language, color, culture. You'll see more diversity at the Kotel on an average day than an 18th century anthropologist would see in an entire lifetime. So we disagree. We always did. We invented the concept of machloket l'shem shamayim, disagreement for the sake of heaven. It's fine. God chose us because he loves a good argument. But we have to find ways where we can stay friends even if we disagree. So this Shabbat, we are going to read Parshat B'Shalach. And you remember, throughout the wilderness, the Jews kept arguing with each other and with Moses. But what did they do after they crossed the Red Sea? Az Yashir Moshe Uvnei Yisrael. When they spoke, they argued, but when they sang together. Find ways of singing together, eating together, working together, doing social action together. And remember that despite all our differences, we are one family. If you have a bad argument with a friend, tomorrow he may not be your friend. But if you have a bad argument with your brother and sister, tomorrow they're still your brother and sister. And that is why we should hold together despite our disagreements.
The Rambam suggests that one should walk the middle way, Shvil Hazav, but in practice, the intermediate path seems to be especially vulnerable. How to travel this road in a world where extremes seems to have such a strong attraction?
First of all, let me explain what the Rambam meant by the middle way. Does this work for you in Spanish? A concept called emotional intelligence. Do you have that concept? The Rambam is talking about emotions when he talks about Shvil HaZahav. He talks about this in the first and second chapters of his Hilchot Deot, which we would call laws of emotion and character. So what he's saying is don't get too excited, but don't stay unexcited for a lifetime. He's talking about emotions. And he's really talking about what today we call emotional intelligence. So he wasn't talking about the middle of the road in some political sense. But you know something? Jews, when all the world is going in one direction, Jews always go in the opposite direction. We are seeing a world in which there is more and more extremism. So let's show the world that we can disagree, but still hold together. Because we should never imitate the rest of the world when the rest of the world is doing bad things. You watch the television, you see the news, the world is full of people fighting one another. So now is the time for Jews to stop fighting one another, because it's our role to set a good example to the world. And when the middle way is being followed by almost nobody, it suddenly becomes not a boring thing, but a very exciting thing to try and do. Okay?
Hi, from Colegio Hebreo Sephardi. Due to globalization, the immediate reach of information through social media, young people seek to participate in different cultures. Does this bring them close to Judaism or drives them away?
The information revolution means that we are surrounded by an almost infinite information overload. Now tell me, do you have something called noise-canceling earphones? Judaism is noise-canceling earphones, right? Sometimes you've got to stop the noise and say, I'm not everyone. This is who I am. And that is why when the social media allow us to connect with other Jews across the world, it becomes very beautiful. It strengthens our identity. This year on Hanukkah, together with the Jerusalem Post and the Israeli government, it happened that they decided that each night of Hanukkah, they would broadcast on Facebook Live a Jew somewhere else in the world lighting Hanukkah candles. So they lit in Red Square in Moscow, they lit Hanukkah candles in Alaska, they lit Hanukkah candles in Tunisia, each day somewhere else in the world. And when it came to London, we did it I lit with one of our Jewish day schools. So when the social media in one sense is an enormous strengthening of Jewish identity, because social media abolish space. They were made for a people that is very small, but very strongly connected and yet scattered around the world. So in that sense, we should use it. But the truth is, identity is made out of community. And there's a big difference between real community and electronic community. 7 years ago, a British research institute did a survey on social media. That's 7 years ago. How old is Facebook? Celebrating its bar mitzvah this year, okay? A nice Jewish boy is at Harvard University, has a row with his girlfriend, and goes back to his room and invents Facebook. That is the Mark Zuckerberg story. But the fact is that this research asked Britons in general, between the ages of 18 and 30, how many Facebook friends you have. The average was 237. That's 7 years ago, right? Then they asked them, on how many of those could you rely if you needed help? The average answer was 2. 1/4 said 1, and 1/8 said none. You belong to a Jewish school or a Jewish Beit Knesset, you have real friends, not Facebook friends. Because if you need their help, they will be there for you. So whereas the social media can strengthen community, it can't create community. Community is created when lots of people like you to come together in real space and real time, panim el panim, face to face. And that is how communities are made. And that is what I told the European director of Facebook when we did our Facebook Live together a little while back. So, okay? Yeah.
Good morning from Seymour Tiche. As Jews of the diaspora, how should we see and feel our geographical nationality?
About being Mexicans.
In our case, yes.
Well, what I've seen of your weather and your schools.
How should we feel it?
How should you feel?
Yeah, like.
Let me tell you exactly how you should feel. The first time Jews were faced with this situation was in Galut Bavel, the Babylonian exile. And we know exactly how they felt, because they have told us in the most powerful poem, one of the most powerful ever written. You remember it, Psalm 137. Al Naharot Bavel, Sham Yashavnu, Gam Bachinu, K'zachrenu et Sion, Eich Nashir et Shir Hashem, Al Admat Necha. We sat and wept. How can we sing Hashem's song in a strange land? And then Jeremiah wrote to them, Yirmiyahu Hanavi. And you can read his letter in Sefer Yirmiyahu, chapter 29. He said, stop mourning, stop crying, build houses, settle down, marry, have children, v'dirshu et shlom ha'ir, and seek the peace and welfare of the city, because in its peace and welfare, you will find peace and welfare. That was 26 centuries ago, the first ever definition of what it is to be a creative minority in exile. So wherever we were, we contributed to the society, and we didn't find any tension between that and being good Jews. So people knew to be a good Jew is to be good an Englishman or a Mexican or a Frenchman. They knew that. We are always loyal to the place where we are, and we love it, because in its peace we find peace. It's just that at the back of our minds we also remember, Im eshkachech Yerushalayim tishkach yemini. This is a wonderful, wonderful place, but we have another place which is the home of the Jewish heart, and it's called Yerushalayim. I hope that explains how one should feel.
In your debate against Richard Dawkins, you mentioned Judaism as being the why of life, the purpose of life, the outside part of the system. So how can we as young adults and leaders of the community help transmit this feeling and understand it for ourselves?
How do we do the why?
The why part in the Judaism.
The whole of Judaism is an education in the why. So Hashem says in one of the first definitions of what it is to be a Jew, he says to Abraham, Ki yadativ asher yitzaveh et banav ve'et beito acharav v'shamru derech Hashem la'asot tzedakah u'mishpat. I have chosen him so that he will teach his children to walk in the way of God by doing what's righteous and just. So the first thing you should know, you have here an Israeli ambassador in Mexico. You are the Jewish ambassador in Mexico. Did you know that? I've just appointed you. Each one of us is an ambassador for Hashem. That's what he meant when he said to Isaiah, Atem Edai, you are my witnesses. He meant you are my ambassadors. So the first why is that when you as a Jew go out into the world and you do good things, you act honestly and with integrity, you help the people who need help, you become God's ambassador. That's part of your why. And that's the general why. Yeah? Then there's a particular why. So let me tell you how I worked out my why. Today in Mexico, right? I said, hang on, what am I doing here? Hashem obviously wanted me to be here in Magen David, in this wonderful gathering of all the schools. And he said, speak to the pupils of all the schools in such a way that they understand that it's okay to ask difficult questions. So my why today was to listen very seriously to the questions you're asking and answer them as best I can. So there's a little exercise that you should go through. What does Hashem really want from me in my life? Do you have a soccer team? Do you play soccer? What's your big passion? Baseball. Listen, guys, I know when I'm out of my depth here. I know a wonderful American. He's not Jewish. He's the head of New York University. His name is John Sexton, and last year he published a book, became a bestseller in America, called Baseball as a Path to God. I read the book and I said, John, it's a great book, and I understood the bits about God, but the bits about baseball are pure mysticism for me. Hashem has a general purpose for each one of us as his ambassador, but he has a particular purpose for you. And it may take a few years to work out what that purpose is, but you should remind yourself of it daily when you think, what is it that I am supposed to do in this place at this time with these circumstances? And that should be a daily discipline of yours, and you will find that it will add very rich meaning to your life. Okay?
Tenemos todavía tiempo. Vamos a seguir otra ronda de preguntas. Espero que pueda dar la ronda completa, pero bueno, seguiremos en orden.
What's that?
There's a few still, we have a few more minutes.
Yeah, sure.
So we'll just continue with the questions of the
Sure.
students.
Rabbi, how can we transmit Zionism with people forgetting their halachical Judaism?
Guys, if you read the Torah, is it a book of transcendental meditation? No. It's full of laws about how to construct a society, how to run agriculture, how to deal with loans, what to do with people who are poor, how to treat people who work for you. Are you with me? It is a basic design for a good society. Now, Jews have lived in almost every country on earth. But in all those 4,000 years, there was only ever one country where they were able to create a society, and that is Israel. And that's why most of the Torah makes sense in Israel. It doesn't make much sense if you're living outside of Israel. Are you with me? So, for instance, you would not know this in Mexico, I guess, but you try celebrating Sukkot in London. You're sitting in a sukkah, it's freezing, it's raining, it's miserable, and this is called Zman Simchatenu, the festival of our joy. The whole of Torah makes sense in terms of Israel. It's a design for a Jewish society in a Jewish land. So I don't see any distinction between Zionism and Judaism. Zionism is what Judaism is about, building a land that will be a fulfillment of what Hashem wanted from us. Now, is the current state of Israel that land? Not yet, because there are all sorts of complicated factors in Israel. Not everyone is religious. Not everyone who's religious is very nice to the people who are not very religious, and so on and so forth. But still, look at it today in the Middle East. It's still the only real democracy. It still has the only real free press. It still has the only independent judiciary. And so it is a role model. So I follow Ramban, the great 13th century Sephardi rabbi, who said, Ikar kol hamitzvot liyoshvim be'eretz Hashem. The fundamental point of all the mitzvahs is to create a society in Israel. So for me, Zionism without Judaism is only half the story. And Judaism without Zionism is only half the story. So for me, the two belong together, and they're stuck together with super glue. Okay? Thank you.
De la Monte. What is there so little leadership of women in the Tanakh?
I'm going to give you a very simple answer. We are just reading the beginning of the book of Shemot, which deals with the Exodus from Egypt. Who is the key figure in the Exodus? You think Moshe. I'm going to tell you the story of the Exodus is a story of 6 courageous women. Number 1, Yocheved, Moses' mother, who had the courage to have a child at a time when Pharaoh was decreeing all male children should be killed. She was a heroine. The second one, Miriam, Moses' sister, who took an enormous risk to make sure Moses had a Jewish education and a Jewish identity. 3 and 4, 2 of my favorite people in the universe, the 2 midwives, Shifra and Puah. They are the first recorded incidents in all of history of refusing to obey an immoral order. It's called civil disobedience. These were the heroines. Civil disobedience was only recognized internationally in 1948 in the United Nations after the Holocaust, when they created the concept of a crime against humanity. In other words, a crime which it was no defense to say, I was only obeying orders. So 3,300 years before the United Nations got it, Shifra and Puah got it. They understood that killing innocent male children was a crime against humanity. Number 5, Pharaoh's daughter. Pharaoh had decreed every Jewish male child should be killed. His own daughter sees this child, knows it's a Jewish child. Miyaldei ha'ivrim huza. She says, this is a Jewish child. And she has the courage not only to rescue the child, but adopt the child and give it its only name, Moshe. Number 6, Tzipporah, Moses' wife, who saved his life by giving their son a Brit. Read Shemot chapter 4. Without those 6 heroic women, there would never have been a Moshe. These were the real heroes of the Exodus, 6 courageous women. Jewish women have always led, but have not always received proper recognition for leading. Nonetheless, now is the time when so many fields of leadership are open to women. Go and lead.
Okay. I have two questions. Is there a chance I could ask both of them?
Go for it.
Great. Okay, so first comes one that is very delicate, but I would like to ask it. So here in Mexico, especially this community, we live in a community that gay people are not accepted. Gay people are not accepted, and I know it's a very delicate subject, but I would like to know how can those people relate to Judaism and stay in the community and be accepted and essentially be happy, because it's something that happens to people and it's a natural thing. And you said that the basic thing about being united as a people is respecting each other and tolerating each other. So I don't know, what are your thoughts on that? Thank you.
I became chief rabbi in Britain in 1991. Two of the first meetings I had were with the Jewish gays and lesbians, and then with the Orthodox Jewish gays and lesbians. Those were two of the most beautiful meetings I ever had, because in both cases, this is how they spoke. They said, "We understand you, Chief Rabbi. You can't give us a bracha. We know that. We're not asking it from you. But we want you to know how vulnerable and emotionally exposed we are and how rejected we feel. And so, we would ask of you, number one, that neither you nor any of your rabbis, when you speak about this in public, should ever say things that are hurtful. Say what you have to say, but say it in a respectful way. And number two, we would like you, please, to appoint an Orthodox Jewish counselor to whom we can turn with some of the tensions that we feel." Now, I thought those were two very good requests. In addition to being chief rabbi, I was also of Beit Din. So the first thing I did was I sat down with my dayanim and I told them exactly about these conversations. And they heard them, and they understood, and they agreed. I then gathered all my rabbis together and told them that those were what the gay community was asking from us. They were not asking for recognition. They were asking for sensitivity and not to be rejected. And I and my dayanim made that request of our rabbanim, and every one of them kept it. I became the only religious leader in Britain who didn't have an argument with the gays and lesbians. The church did, the others did, the Muslims did. We were the only ones who didn't. So they respected my position and I respected theirs, and it was a very good position. So, for instance, whenever something came up where I had to make a public statement on this issue, I would always let them see what I proposed to say, to see if any sentence or any word in that was hurtful. And once in a while they would say, "Yes, we don't like the way you say that. Could you say it another way?" And we worked together to make sure that anything I said in public was not hurtful to them. And we did create the role of counselor to them, and they did go to them. And I thought that was a good and decent way, and I valued that relationship all along. It allowed me sometimes to talk about gays in a way that they found important. So every Holocaust Memorial Day, when I was at the national service, I would always remind people that gays were sent to the concentration camps, not just Jews. And we worked out a relationship. And I didn't condemn them, and they didn't condemn me, and it worked. So I hope that you understand that that's how you can do things. And I think that's how we should do things. Now you had another question.
I'm sorry. Vamos a darle a alguien más la palabra. Perdón.
From
Sorry.
Javne School.
Sorry, could I just say to the person who just asked that question? I just want to say to you, it took courage to ask that question. And I salute you. Thank you for your courage and your honesty.
Rab, you just said it's important to ask difficult questions, and I have one difficult question for you. In Mexico, Syrian communities do not accept convert Jews as members, even if the conversion was Orthodox. The reason for this is to protect their communities from assimilation. According to the Torah, is this right or wrong?
According to the Torah, this is called lemigdar milta. It's making a fence around the Torah, which we're permitted to do. The Syrian community is the only community that has adopted that policy. The result of that policy is that the Syrian Jewish community has the lowest outmarriage rate of any community in the world. So it worked for them. The important thing to realize is that we have a principle in Jewish law which says, "Hamachmir al atzmo tavo alav bracha." You can be strict for yourself, and that's great. You just can't be strict for everyone else. Are you with me? So it's important that we recognize the integrity of the Syrian community. It arises out of their history, it is their decision, and they are entitled to do it. It's important for the Syrian community to recognize that there are other communities that don't adopt that. Indeed, almost all communities don't adopt it. And therefore there has to be respect that what works for the Syrian community does not work for the other communities. We have to live with that difference. Let me say loud and clear. I always try to include as many people as possible. So I probably wouldn't have made a very good Syrian chief rabbi. But this, I can promise you, the Syrian Jewish community is a community I love with all my heart, because they discovered what works for them, and it really does work for them. And I feel blessed by the very special friendship I have with the Syrian Jewish community in Brooklyn, in New York. Every day I daven in the talit that the Syrian Jewish community gave me, and they say to me, "Why, have you suddenly become Sephardi?" I say, "No, because it was given to me by a community that I love and I respect." So it works for the Syrian Jewish community. Other communities have other ways that work for them, and we have to recognize that each community has the right to establish certain rules for itself to protect its own Jewish future.
Damos por concluida la sesión, Rabbi. We're very happy to have you here. Your answers was very...
What?
The answers and all the information you gave us really encouraged us to keep in the bad way of Judaism, to keep educating leaders on that way, and I hope that all the students have meaningful answers, even though we couldn't be able to answer all their questions. Thank you for coming here. Rabbi, again, thanks for coming to Magen David.
Thank you.
It was an honor for us.
Thank you. Chavra, take away this simple message. Argue with one another. Ask the toughest questions you can ask. But never stop loving one another or respecting one another. Go and build a Jewish future of which we will all be proud. Thank you.
El rabino, el rab va a salir por el elevador de allá. Les pido a todos que se queden sentados en lo que sale el rab y después salgan. Muchas gracias a todas las escuelas por el esfuerzo en venir. Siempre es su casa. Muchas gracias.